The ravens had long since hushed their clamor across the ramparts of Winterfell, and a mournful hush had fallen over the snow-packed courtyards. At the heart of the godswood, beneath the redivine visage of the ancient weirwood, a single scarlet candle flickered in defiance of the freezing wind. It cast a trembling bloom of light over Melisandre of Ashai as she knelt before the gnarled roots, her crimson robes rippling like slow-moving blood. She had spent 10 nights in silent vigil, listening to the hush of the dark for guidance. Now her lips moved without sound, forming a prayer older than the towers ringing the north. She unfurled a length of black silk, revealing a shard of antler snapped from a once regal crown, an artifact taken from the crypts far below Winterfell, where the kings of the Rock and Vale and North all slept in sullen stone. Melisandre's fingers caressed the broken tine, feeling the echo of the man who had worn it. Robert Baratheon, the hammer of rebels, the roar behind the rebellion, the Stormlord who had perished fat, drunken, and disillusioned. "Light protect us," Davos Seaworth murmured, standing watch a stone's throw behind her. He kept the vigil reluctantly, fingers flexing against the hilt of his dirk. Each breath steamed in the air, mingling with the scented smoke of Melisandre's braziers. Davos did not believe. Not truly. Yet he had seen a dead man walk before. Had seen Jon Snow gasp back to life on a blood-stained table. That memory was a brand on his mind, searing him with mingled hope and dread. Around them, the sacred grove seemed to hold its breath. Snowflakes drifted through the branches in white silence. Ghost, the direwolf, lingered on the periphery, eyes like red coals glimmering in the dimness. He paced once, twice, restless, then sank to his belly beside Jon Snow, who leaned upon a frosted stump, arms crossed, jaw set. The king in the north had granted the Red Woman this final attempt at redemption, though the shadows of her past failures clung to her like frost to iron. "Are you certain?" Jon asked, his voice a low burr that quivered the candle's flame. Melisandre's gaze did not shift from the antler. "As certain as I am that dawn follows night. The Lord of Light demands champions equal to the darkness ahead. Stannis Baratheon was not the chosen one, nor was Renly, but the blood of the stag carries power. The darkness beyond the wall has awakened. We require more than swords. We require legends." Davos shot her a look. "He's been dead 16 years. There'll be little left in those bones, save dust." "Dust can ignite," she countered, "if touched by fire strong enough." Jon's eyes flicked to the bundle that lay nestled in a copper bowl of glowing coals. It was Leroy's gift, the last scrap of the king's hunting surcoat, sodden with the wine and boar's blood that had killed him. A fetid stink rose from it even now. Legend or no, Jon doubted a spirit could be coaxed from such rot, but he felt the weight of the Night King's cold gaze even miles away. He felt it in every gust of wind that rattled shuttered windows. Desperation could make believers of them all. Melisandre lifted the antler to her lips and whispered a name that had not been spoken with reverence for years. Then she pressed the broken crown against her breast, red robes parting to reveal the ruby heart at her throat. It pulsed once, a scarlet star in the gloom. "Come forth, Robert Baratheon," she intoned, voice echoing against bark and stone. "Come forth and lift your hammer once more. Your people call you. Your realm needs you. Your son needs you." A hiss of wind curled around them, stirring the candles so fiercely it nearly guttered out. The scent of smoke thickened. A tremor passed through the weirwood's branches, a groan like the waking of old wood. Snow dust cascaded in shimmering clouds as unseen hands shook the boughs. Davos felt his knees weaken. He had sailed the smoky sea, weathered storms that cracked ships in half, yet no gale had whispered his name in such an intimate rasp. From the iron-banded coffer at Melisandre's side, she took 3 vials, blood as dark as garnet, smoke swirling within glass. The life essence of slain deer, gathered beneath a black moon. She poured the thick liquid in circles around the scarlet candle, and the flame blazed brighter, lancing the gloom with violent red. Sparks danced across the snow like ruby-bright fireflies. "Roar Law," she called, "Lord of Flame, God of Light. Banish the cold that binds his soul. Unshackle him from death's dim prison. Let the Storm Lord ride the storm anew." The words rang like steel. Joan's breath caught as the snow inside the circle began to melt, exposing damp earth. Steam rose, carrying the coppery tang of blood. Davos whispered a prayer to the mother. His palms slid to the pouch of finger bones at his neck, though they offered little comfort. The ground shuddered. The candle flared white-hot, its stem drooping, wax weeping. Melisandre's eyes went wide, and for an instant the ruby at her throat blazed so fiercely it blinded Jon. When his sight returned, he beheld a shape within the circle, a shimmer like heat over desert sand. It slowly resolved into the figure of a man, broad-shouldered, towering, draped in a tattered hunting cloak. His features were fog-shifting, yet unmistakable. The thick beard, the wolfish grin that once charmed half the realm. Robert Baratheon, as he had been in the flower of war, before politics and despair dulled his edge. A thunderous crack split the air. The figure gasped, sucked wind into empty lungs, and stumbled. His knees struck dirt with a thud. Snow hissed as it met the sudden heat radiating from his form. He clutched his chest, eyes rolling, mouth open in a silent roar. Jon forced himself forward, though the hairs on his arms prickled sharp. "Robert," he asked, voice scarcely more than breath. The apparition's head jerked, eyes locking on him. They glowed an eldritch orange in the candle's blaze. Melisandre slipped the antler onto the ground before him, and drew a slender blade from her sleeve. She sliced a thin crescent across her own palm, crimson spilling onto the snow. The ruby hummed like a living heart. "Breathe, Storm Lord," she whispered. "Breathe." Robert's chest heaved again. The glow in his eyes flickered, and his outline steadied, bones knitting beneath the skin, sinew and muscle filling hollow spaces. A living man began to replace the ethereal swirl. Davos swallowed hard. "7, save us." Robert's first sound was a ragged cough. His second, a laugh, hoarse, incredulous, full of life. He pressed wide hands to the earth, curling fingers into mud. Snowflakes melted on his skin, water running in rivulets down newly formed veins. He raised his head and regarded the grove. "Hells take me," he growled, voice thunderous despite its cracked timbre. "I've dreamt of colder stones than this." Jon stood transfixed. The man kneeling before him radiated a vitality that belied the years of gluttony and drink that had claimed him. Here was Robert in his prime, the same fire that had toppled the Dragon Kings. Melisandre's arms fell to her sides. She swayed, unsteady, as if the ritual had drained her marrow. Yet her smile was triumphant. "You are reborn, Lord of Storms." Robert's gaze snapped to her. Recognition wavered in his eyes, then suspicion. "Red woman," he said, tasting the words. "What witchcraft is this?" "Salvation," she replied simply. He lurched to his feet, unsteady but powerful as a bull. Fresh air filled his lungs. He drank it greedily. Every breath seemed to thrum through him like a drum. Memories came in shards. A boar's tusk in his flank, Cersei's soft hiss of triumph, the sweet oblivion of wine. Then darkness. Now he was here, amid snow and strange faces, though one face was familiar. "Stark boy," he rumbled, eyes narrowing on John. "You're Ned's whelp. Come closer." John stepped forward. "My lord." Robert clasped him by the shoulders with hands heavy and warm. "Gods, you've his eyes, and you wear the black yet bear a crown." He laughed again, booming. "How the realm shifts when I look away." "It shifts still," John said. "For the worse, a dead army marches, led by the Night King. Winter has come in truth. We fight for every breath." Robert's grin faded. He turned, scanning the grove, the towers rising beyond the wall of trees. His tongue wet his lips. "And you summoned me from the grave to aid you." "We need a hammer," Davos said, voice low. "A hammer to shatter ice." Robert's eyes glittered, yet beneath the bravado John saw flickers of confusion, of dread. The world had changed beyond reckoning. He had returned, but to what? Melisandre stepped forward, lifting a flaming brand from the basin of coals. She held it before him, and the brand's fire hissed like a living serpent. "You were a hero once. Be one again. The darkness rises, and only the brightest flames can hold it at bay." Robert held her gaze. For a heartbeat of perfect stillness, the world balanced on the edge of his answer. Then his mouth curled into that famed rebel's grin. "Fetch me my warhammer," he said. "A real one. Mind, not that cursed tourney trinket. Fetch ale enough to drown a kraken, and a forge hot enough to bend dragon steel. I have a winter to break and a king of corpses to kill." John exhaled, and felt, just for a moment, the spark of belief ignite within him. The Night King's chill seemed to retreat an inch from his bones. Melisandre closed her eyes, swaying like a candle drained of wax. The ruby's glow dimmed to a faint ember. "So it begins," she whispered. The gods' wood exhaled with them. Snow rustled from branches in soft applause, and the scarlet candle guttered out, its purpose spent. In its place stood a man reborn, steam rising from his broad shoulders as the cold air kissed living flesh. By dawn, word had spread through Winterfell's stone bowels like wildfire. King Robert returned from death, roving the yard with a smith's apron about his neck, testing hammers against anvils until sparks leapt in bright fountains. Blacksmiths and sellswords gaped at the sight. Some murmured prayers. Others crossed themselves as though bannering off evil. Robert worked without pause, sweat purling on his brow despite the frost. He shaped iron not by measured craft, but raw violence, blows ringing out in rhythm that echoed through the warrens. Boom, 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 like a war drum. Gendry watched him, arms folded, blue eyes wide. A bastard grown to a man, he alone bore the proof of Robert's blood in his strong jaw and broad shoulders. When their gazes met across the forge, both jolted as though struck. Robert left the anvil smoking and strode across the yard. He took Gendry's face in his calloused hands and searched it as though seeking the boy he'd never known. "You've her eyes," he whispered, voice rough. The memory of a dark-haired tavern girl fluttered behind his lids. "What's your name?" "Gendry," the smith answered, throat tight. Robert nodded slowly. "Gendry Baratheon." He tasted the name with pride. "A hammer suits you. Will you ride beside me?" "Aye," Gendry breathed. Elsewhere, Jon convened council with Sansa, Davos, and Tormund Giantsbane. They spoke in hushed urgency, planning for the wind-bitten months ahead. Supplies, refugees, arms, the ledger of war. Jon felt the weight of every candle that burned down to wax in the hours it took to feed, clothe, and shelter the masses flooding Winterfell's gates. And now Robert, another mouth, another legend, strode among them like a storm. Would he bind them, or splinter them with old grudges? Jon could not yet say, but already the men whispered as they once had around roaring hearths. "Robert will lead, Robert will fight, Robert cannot die." Hope, fragile and longing, kindled anew. As the sky blushed with weak light, Melisandre climbed a parapet to watch the forge below. She wrapped her crimson cloak tight, though no cold touched her skin. Her bones ached with the ritual's cost. A lifetime of years had slipped through her veins in hours, yet she felt oddly light, as though a burden had been set down. Do not squander this flame. She prayed to the awakening sun. Somewhere in the east, Lor's unseen fires licked the horizon, and on their wings rode the faint scent of mint and salt, the promise of summer longed for. But the Night King would not yield. Beyond the wall, glaciers groaned and split, birthing rivers of icy mist. Dead hands clawed free of frozen tombs in numbers greater than ever before. The lieutenants in blue plating turned their spears southward, eyes cold as starlight. In that alien silence, a new threat stirred, older even than the others. Shadows moved inside wood and hollow hill, ancient wights waking from centuries of sleep. Against such horrors, one man's revival seemed a candle in a hurricane. Yet the first fires of every dawn began with but a spark. 3 days after his return, Robert stood atop the battlements with John and Tormund, surveying the army that amassed in the courtyard. Wildlings mixed with Northmen, Riverlanders with Vale Knights. Black brothers of the Night's Watch drilled beside the armored guard of White Harbor, all ground beneath Robert's keen gaze. Never one for subtlety, he critiqued each formation as though speaking to green squires, barking corrections that left seasoned captains red-faced. "Your pikes are loose," he snarled at a clutch of free folk wielding spears. "Hold them like you'd hold a wench at the feast. Firm, but not so tight she bites." "No. Tormund laughed, slapping Robert's back. The two bellowed about drinking horns and mammoth hunts, until the bitter wind swallowed their mirth. John let them revel. Such sparks of camaraderie warmed the men more surely than pitch-lined braziers. Yet he could not banish the chill knotting his stomach. Scouts reported white columns sighted 3 days' march away. The dead had crossed the last river and slaughtered whole villages. Ravens brought tales of frost-bitten refugees staggering south, tongues black and limbs stiff. The Night King's vanguard moved swift as lightning in the dark. John turned to Robert. "We need your counsel, your grace. How would you break their lines?" Robert, hammer slung across his broad shoulders, regarded John with an expression half fond, half stern. "You know their weakness better than any," he said. "But I know men, and men need something to follow, not rank, not command, something that sings in their blood. Give them a banner they fear to fail." He hefted his hammer, recently forged anew, dark steel inlaid with lines of glowing red. "They'll hold if I'm in front, and if I fall, they'll hold anyway, because they'll be too bloody ashamed to cower." John studied the hammer. Valyrian runes pulsed beneath the metal's surface, echo of fire trapped in iron. "Dragon glass bound to steel," he said softly, "hot enough to shatter ice." Robert's grin was feral, hot enough to crack the Night King's skull. That evening, Sansa sought Robert in the great hall. Fires blazed high in each hearth, but the room felt cavernous compared to the warmth of the forge. Robert sat alone at the long table, a cask of ale at hand, his new hammer propped against his chair like a slumbering master. He turned at her approach, eyes sharpening in candlelight. "Lady Stark," he greeted. "Your Grace?" She inclined her head, red hair glowing like copper. She recalled the boisterous king who once visited Winterfell, the stench of wine and sweat that clung to him. The man before her smelled of forged smoke and cold steel. Rebirth had shaved years from his face. Only crow feet at his eyes betrayed time's passage. Sansa lifted a folded parchment. The eyes ran thin even before the wildlings arrived. The grain stores will not feed this host past 3 months. If winter deepens..." Robert drained his cup, wiped his mouth on his sleeve. "Then we hunt, we fish, we break bread with the gods themselves if we must. The realm survived with less in my youth." She set her jaw. 200,000 mouths cannot live on nostalgia. Robert's laugh rumbled low. "You've your mother's fire. Good. The North needs fire." He leaned back. "When I was young, hunger was nothing but another wound in battle. It kept us hard. We'll tighten belts, aye, but we'll not starve. Besides," he reached for the hammer, fingers stroking the runes. "Dead men eat nothing. Once we smash them, the earth will bloom again." Sansa searched his eyes for jest, found none. She wondered if the king truly grasped the magnitude of the undead tide, but resolve glimmered there, bright and implacable. Perhaps that, she thought, was what the realm needed most. Far to the north of Winterfell, beyond the chill high passes of Skirling Gorge, the Night King surveyed his gathering host from the back of an undead dragon whose tattered wings spanned the width of a frozen lake. His blue gaze pierced the storm clouds swirling overhead. At his silent command, tens of thousands of wights arrowed south in endless columns. Wolves, bears, giants, and men. A tide of nightmare flesh. Each footfall sent white powder skittering across ice like shattered glass. In the Night King's dead hands, a spear of condensed frost shimmered with baleful light. At his waist hung a man's skull encased in rime, the remains of a legendary hero slain centuries before, preserved as a grim trophy. Now new champions rose to challenge his dominion. Jon Snow, breaker of vows, Daenerys Stormborn, mother of dragons, and somewhere in the flicker of prophecy, the hammer of a resurrected king. He did not feel fear, yet the world trembled with possibilities, branching like cracks across ice, and that tremor reached even him. He tightened his grip on the frost-spear, and ice creaked beneath his gauntleted fingers. Then he turned the dragon southward, and the night wailed in his wake. Gendry's hammer rang in the blacksmith's yard well past midnight, skittered into the darkness like transient stars as he shaped links of gleaming dragonglass into armored plates. At his side labored Tobho Mott, old now, coaxed north by urgency and coin. Mott's clever hands guided the younger man through tempering dragon steel, while Gendry's raw strength bent metal to will. Robert's voice drifted from the shadows, low and steady. He was a fine smith in King's Landing. The boy wrought helms fit for princes before he could shave. "Nay," Gendry startled at the words, turning to find the king watching, one hand cradling a cup. Embers painted Robert's face in shifting amber. "Never thought myself prince's kin," Gendry muttered. Robert stepped into the workspace, elbows on the anvil, eyes alight. "You're mine, boy, by blood and by right. I should have found you years ago." Gendry's throat tightened. "Why now?" "Because death wipes away foolishness." Robert's gaze softened. "If the dark wins, names mean little. But if we triumph, the old world will need rebuilding, and Baratheon blood still courses in these veins." He tapped his son's chest. "Storm's End waits for a lord." Gendry swallowed. "I'm no lord. You will be." Robert clasped his shoulder, squeeze almost bruising. "But first you'll fight, side by side." Gendry's eyes shone. "Aye." In the glow of forge fire, two hammers met, one aged and storied, the other new-forged and eager. Sparks leapt skyward, harbingers of storms to come. In cramped map rooms and torchlit corridors, Sansa's scribes drafted missives to every holdfast, still unfallen. Arya rode restless through the castle at night, blade of winter looped at her hip, shadows sparring with the thought of icy foes. Samuel Tarley remained buried in dusty tomes, devouring every scrap of lore on others, whites, and long-forgotten rituals that might unravel the Night King's secret. Melisandre moved among them like a ghost, ruby dimmed to a faint spark, yet her presence drew stares and muttered oaths. She offered no explanations nor apologies. Her gaze was fixed northward, toward a destiny unspooled in flames unseen. One by one, great torches rose along Winterfell's walls, tall iron braziers filled with pitch and dragon glass shards. They cast pillars of orange light into the sky, beacons for refugees still trudging south. Under each column, soldiers sharpened blades until edges gleamed mirror bright. Women strung arrows tipped with obsidian, children braided rope to line the trench walls. Every able soul found a task, and above them, Robert Baratheon stalked the battlements at dusk, hammer across his shoulder, roaring commands that echoed like drums of war. Though the chill bit deep, his breath steamed hot, and his pulse thrummed with battle lust. Life coursed through him as though 16 years of sloth and decay had been but a dream. Yet when quiet fell, those thin hours before dawn, Robert paced the God's Wood alone. He tested each breath, half expecting icy dread to flood his lungs, to remind him death lay in ambush. None came. He was alive, undeniably, furiously alive. But memory lingered, the darkness between heartbeats after the boar's tusk, the slow ebb of warmth. He remembered Cersei's smile as Maester Pycelle's leeches bled him, remembered his confession to Ned Stark, how love and power had soured under his grasp like rotten apples. Now he had another chance, yet the realm he once ruled teetered on the abyss. Could a single hammer stave off oblivion? He stared at the weirwood's face, scarlet tears frozen on white bark, silent witness to centuries. The gods offered no answer, but morning wood, in blood and frost. On the 7th night after Robert's return, black clouds swallowed the moon. A deathly silence crept through Winterfell's stones, so complete even the dire wolves whined low. The courtyard torches guttered, their flames paling like sick children. Soldiers clustered in knots, eyes wide at the sudden still. Jon stood atop the eastern wall when the first sound came, a long, mournful horn far in the distance. 3 blasts, not the horn of brother returning from raging, not even the cry of attacker. No, this horn keen despair. The dead had come. An icy gust howled between the ramparts, gnawing through furs to bone. Snow whirled, thickening, swirling until the night itself seemed to congeal into a blizzard. Through the swirling white, a dim blue glow grew brighter, marching inexorable toward Winterfell's outer trench. Jon gripped Longclaw, heart hammering. "To the walls," he bellowed. Loose, arrows soared into the storm, dark streaks vanishing into swirling snow. Some found purchase, pinpricks of fire extinguished in the whiteness. Then shapes emerged, shambling whites, antlers of frozen flesh, eyes empty but for icy light. Behind them loomed giants of bone, swinging uprooted trees like clubs. Robert crashed to Jon's side, dragonglass warhammer glimmering with ember lines. He planted one foot on the parapet and roared, a sound that cut through wind, through fear, through death. Storm's End. Somewhere below, Gendry echoed the cry. At thunderous rally, the defenders felt their spines harden. They knocked flaming arrows, braced spears, hefted swords. Davos strode the line shouting orders, while Arya darted up hidden stairs to vantage unseen, needle and Valyrian dagger ready for shadows. The first ranks of whites struck the flaming trench and toppled in snarling heaps. The flames licked higher, but more bodies piled, forming a bridge of charred dead. Over them lurched others, heedless of their own burning flesh. Snow hissed and smoked where fire met ice. "Hold," Jon growled, though his own breath came ragged. He knew this battle was but prelude. The Night King would reveal himself only when the walls faltered. They must weather the storm's first assault, then strike at the heart. Robert's hammer rose and fell, sending waves of crackling flame arching across the trench. Each strike sent shards of molten dragon glass screaming into the swarm, shattering whites in bursts of blue fire. His laughter boomed, savage delight at the carnage. Yet, for every dead thing crushed, 3 more clambered over the pyre. Thunder cracked in the clouds. Lightning forked above the castle, eerily silent, and in its white glare, wings materialized. A dragon of midnight scales and tattered membrane, eyes cold and blue, swooped from the blizzard. The dead dragon Viserion shrieked, exhaling a torrent of pale flame that turned stone slick with rime. It crashed against the inner wall, frost spiderwebbing across ancient masonry. Sean's pulse roared like rivers in his ears. He scanned the night for Daenerys and her living dragons. Where was the counterstrike? Robert's hand clamped his shoulder. Stark, the walls won't hold forever. Open the gates, let them come. Meet them in the yard where hammers sing. Open the gates, and we're overrun, Jon argued. We hold the walls. Walls are cages. Robert snapped. Cages for hammer blows. We break them, we burn them, no quarter. Jon hesitated. He had trained men for siege defense, not open brawl against endless dead. Yet Robert's fervor burned hot, infectious. He felt it stir within him, a longing to charge, to face the enemy not on stone ramps, but in the churn of melee. Before he could answer, a horn blared from the west wall. The crimson dragon dived through the storm, Drogon's fury lighting the night with dragon fire. Flames jetted across the trench, clearing a swath of whites. Behind him glided Rhaegal, emerald wings flashing. Atop Drogon's neck rode Daenerys Targaryen, hair whipping like silver banners. Jon's heart clenched. Relief suffused him, warring with dread. Viserion shrieked and veered, banking toward the living dragons in deadly spiral. Snow and flame collided in the sky as titans of fire and ice clashed. Robert hefted his hammer. That's our cue, boy. Jon met his gaze. Open the gates, he commanded the nearest guard. The man gaped. My king. Do it. Chains rattled. Great wooden portals groaned as they lurched inward. The blizzard howled through the gap, carrying with it the stink of decay. Whites poured forward, skeletal hands grasping, jaws snapping. North, Robert cried, and leapt from the parapet onto the stair below, hammer blurring. Jon followed, Longclaw bared, ghost at his heels in silent rage. The courtyard became a cauldron of clashing steel and exploding dragon glass. Sparks rained like meteors. Giant bones shattered beneath Robert's swings, each impact a thunderclap that rattled teeth. Gendry battled beside him, their hammers a duet of death. Torment carved a path with his great yaks, red beard ush-flecked. Arya flowed through gaps, blades flickering, slipping past the dead's clumsy lunges to sever joints. Jon met a cluster of undead, blade cleaving, burying dragonglass through skulls. Each kill dissolved in bursts of brittle frost, leaving him soaked in rime. Ghost lunged, tearing throats, fur spattered blue. The tide of corpses seemed endless, yet within the maelstrom Jon glimpsed something impossible. A ripple among white fields, a clearing where snow refused to fall. The Night King strode there, tall and unhurried, frost spear poised, his eyes locked with Jon's. Twin shards of winter so piercing Jon's breath caught. Robert saw him too. With a roar, he slammed a white aside and surged forward. Jon moved to intercept, but whites swarmed, battering him back. Robert plowed ahead, hammer blazing, until only open yard yawned between him and the ancient evil. The Night King stopped, his head tilted, almost curious. Robert gripped his weapon in two hands. "Come on then," he bellowed, voice echoing off stone. "Let's see if ice can break stone." The Night King lifted his spear. Snow stilled. The battlefield hushed. Even screams faded, as though the world itself inhaled, waiting. Time stretched thin, threads of fate weaving tighter. Then, from the ramparts, Melisandre's ruby flared, as if waking. She stood above the chaos, lips moving in silent prayer. The jewel's light pulsed once, twice, then dimmed. Yet those pulses rippled across the yard, unseen currents. Robert felt them course through his arms, charging the dragonglass veins of his hammer. Heat bloomed, a forge reborn in his grip. He glared at the Night King, unblinking, and the Night King smiled, a crack of blue frost across his face. He hurled the spear. Robert surged into motion, hammer sweeping up in arching guard. Steel met ice with a detonation like shattering crystal, sparks and frost exploding outward. The force drove Robert to one knee, boots gouging furrows in packed snow. Pain lanced through his arm, but he sucked a fearless breath and rose, flinging the spear aside. It lodged quivering in a stone planter, frost crawling like vines over the granite. The Night King extended a hand. The spear answered, wrenching free, drifting back through air toward its master. Robert did not wait. With a beast's bellow he charged, snow exploding underfoot. Hammer raised, he closed the distance. The Night King snatched the spear, twirled it, met him halfway. They crashed like mountains colliding. Ice met fire, iron met frozen heart, and the war for dawn had truly begun. The winter night convulsed with clamor as Robert's hammer rang off the Night King's spearhead. Each collision, a trumpet blast shuddering through Winterfell's marrow. Sparks cascaded in fountains of orange and blue, mingling in the storm-wrought air. Snowflakes vaporized on contact with the incandescent dragonglass veins scribed into the hammer's core. Shards of rime screamed away from the spear's jagged edges, tiny crystalline razors slicing through the gale. Robert pressed in, legs churning, every heartbeat a forge bellows filling his lungs with scalding air. Wind howled around them, twisting their silhouettes into mythic specters. The Night King answered every blow with sinuous pivots, movements so precise they carved perfect circles in the blizzard's swirl. Ice cracked beneath their feet, the courtyard stones frosting and thawing in abrupt cycles of frostbite and fire. Jon fought to reach them, each step a duel against the flood of whites cascading through the sundered gate. Longclaw blazed a path of violet-white flames as he cleaved necks and shattered ribs, the Valyrian steel singing an ancient dirge for every soul it released. Ghosts snapped and tore beside him, the dire wolf a streak of moonlit fury, crimson spackling his white coat like rubies strewn across fresh snow. Tormund's roaring laughter rolled over the tumult as he hacked away a frost giant's knee, sending the towering corpse tumbling into a mound of shrieking whites. Gendry's hammer rose and fell with breathless urgency, the young blacksmith's shoulders trembling yet unbroken as dragonglass shards spider-webbed through skull after skull. Above, Drogon spiraled in blistering arcs, flames carving neon scars through the blizzard. Each gout of fire melted the storm in bulging pockets of scalding rain, momentarily illuminating the battle below like some hellish dawn. Rhaegal flanked his sibling, green fire blossoming into the night to clash midair with Viserion's corpse breath. The undead dragon shrieked, a sound like splintering glaciers, and unleashed a beam of frigid blue flame that sheared through the battlements, skimming mere feet above where Sansa and her archers loosed dragonglass arrows. Stone hissed, exploded, and turned brittle, falling away in clouds of dust that refroze into jagged spears before striking the courtyard. Daenerys leaned into Drogon's neck, silver hair whipping in banners behind her. Every instinct screamed to dive, to incinerate the Night King where he dueled below. But Robert's massive figure severed any clear line of fire, and John's presence at the vortex edge bound her in dread. Instead, she banked sharply and plunged toward Viserion, the undead dragon wheeling in echo of her maneuver, blue eyes incandescent in the maelstrom. The two living dragons hammered their wings, beating gale against gale, converging on their fallen kin. Talons flashed, teeth met with bone-shearing crunches. The heavens became a carnivore's convocation, wings and claws, and fire-painting primal murals against the storm. Arya dashed along the rampart's inner ledge, using the intermittent dragon fire to leap the gaps cleft by Viserion's frost. Needle dispatches left and right blurred into a single silver line. She broke from the wall, seized a dangling rope, swung across the courtyard's chaos, and landed atop a broken cart's canopy. Below, Sam staggered beneath the weight of a leather satchel stuffed with obsidian daggers, clutching them to his chest even as White surged. Arya whistled. Sam spun, eyes wide, and tossed a blade overhand. She caught it, dove into a roll beneath a frost giant's descending fist, and drove the dragonglass into its calf. A thunderclap of cracking bone echoed. The giant toppled sideways, flattening a rank of lesser dead, clearing Sam's path to the interior stair. Inside the great hall's shadowy foyer, Bran's eyes were milk white, limbs slack against the chair that wheeled him into the quiet recess by the hearth. His consciousness soared above Winterfell, riding the wind-swept ravens swirling beyond the battlements. He saw patterns of cold, ridges of ice spiraling south, and in their center, the Night King's spectral aura, an obsidian void amid bleached world. Yet through another coruscating thread of heat and violence, he sensed the living force emanating from Robert's resurrected form, a bonfire of blood and iron surging, bright enough to sting Bran's war guise. The new king's life burned differently than all around him, new forged by fissures of fire and death. Bran sank deeper into the vision until the past, present, and possible futures bled into a single tapestry. He watched Robert Tivett deflect a killing thrust, rebound with a feint, and unleash an overhead strike that detonated a halo of molten dragonglass along the Night King's left pauldron. Frost shattered in spirals that caught starlight, spinning away like diamond dust. He saw the Night King's immediate adaptation, no hesitation, no pain, countering with an upward slash that skimmed Robert's beard and scored a furrow across the iron crown of antlers hastily forged into his helm. Beneath splintering metal, Robert grinned, savage and triumphant. Bran felt the ripple of prophecy's fabric quiver at that grin. 1,000 outcomes realigned. Some diverged toward dawn, others plummeted to endless night. Yet there, just there, Bran perceived thin gold filaments woven by Melisandre's incantations, threads tethering Robert's heart to fires unseen. She stood now in the doorway, overlooking the yard, cloaked in red and exhaustion, her ruby only faintly pulsing yet sheathing those filaments in fragile warmth. Bran followed them backward, past broken antler crown, past shards of kingly pride, into the deeper myth of Azor Ahai and the forging of Lightbringer. In Robert's hands the hammer had no name, yet within its core, melded through steel and dragonglass, lay the echo of a sword that had once burned suns. A hammer, yes, but bound to the same primeval truth. Fire forges destiny. Far below, the clash intensified. The Night King, soundless as ever, pivoted away from Robert and swept his spear low across the snow, catching a wave of corpses in its frosted path. Those whites froze mid-lunge, then shattered as the spear's tip carved a half-circle arc, meteorite shards of ice erupting outward. Robert barely twisted in time. Razor crystals scored cuts along his knuckles, drawing beads of living red that sizzled when they struck the hammer's molten glyphs. He snarled, a noise equal parts battle lust and surprise, and lunged. The hammer arced into a crushing downswing aimed at the Night King's collarbone. The spear rose to parry, but too late. Robert's blow connected. Obsidian runes flared white. A sonic boom cracked in the night. Stone underfoot crinkled like thin ice on a pond and split along a widening fracture that raced outward in every direction. The Night King staggered for the first time any living soul had witnessed, a spider web of glowing fissures racing through the icy cuirass across his chest. Blue light flickered rapidly along those cracks, as though alien blood sought escape. Yet even as Robert pressed his advantage, bringing the hammer around for a reverse hook aimed at the temple, the Night King flowed backward with impossible fluidity, evading by a breath. He planted the spear's butt in the snow, channeled a pulse of cold through its length, and released it in a shockwave that exploded Robert off his feet, hurling him into a heap of frosted bodies. John saw the impact and cut a brutal path through foes to reach Robert. He vaulted the fractured bodies, hooked his arm under the king's elbow, and yanked him upright. Robert shook off the daze, like a bear rising after a musk ox kick. Blood dripped from a split brow, mingling with sweat already freezing in his beard. Yet his grin widened. "Did you see him shiver?" Robert roared over the din. John nodded once, eyes narrowing. "He can be hurt." "Then hurt him again," Robert rasped, hefting his hammer. "And harder." Together they advanced, John slightly behind and to Robert's right, blades whirling in counterpoint to hammer arcs. They traded flurries with the Night King at the courtyard's center. Every stroke from Longclaw incising faint gashes of searing heat across the ancient entity's armor. Every strike from Robert's hammer concussing air in thunderous pulses. The Night King retaliated with spear strokes too swift for mortal eyes, frost trailing like comets, each thrust aimed to separate the allies. Several times he succeeded, sliding between them, isolating one from the other. Yet each time Tormund or Arya or Davos filled the breach, forcing the Night King to contend with shifting angles of attack. Gendry sprinted across the yard, carrying a bandolier of fresh dragonglass spikes forged in the last calm hour before battle. Reaching Robert, he embedded 4 of them into the hammer's head, slotting obsidian pegs into sockets Tobho-Mott had designed for quick interchange. The hammer's glow surged, taking on a swirling ember tone, magma veins pulsing as though molten hearts had been locked within. Robert gave his bastard son a curt nod, gratitude too fierce for words, and pivoted back to strike. Viserion and Drogon clashed overhead, the living dragon's roar of furnace blast. Drogon latched jaws upon Viserion's neck, spines crunching, but the corpse dragon twisted free, ice-laden claws raking across Drogon's flank, tearing crimson rivers and black scales. Daenerys hissed through teeth. She steadied her seat, mind linked to her wounded child. She looked down at the courtyard and spotted the Night King locked with Robert and Jon. Rage flared. She directed Drogon to wheel away from Viserion momentarily, unleash a spiral dive straight toward the yard. Bran sensed what was coming. Through his ravens he shrieked warnings no soldier understood. Inside his body, in the hearth's hush, his lips whispered names. Daenerys. Not yet. Drogon descended with monstrous velocity, jaws glowing with pent-up flame. Below, Robert and Jon realized the tremor in the air at the last instant. Both felt the heat press on their backs. They dove in opposite directions as Drogon disgorged an inferno that bathed the Night King in living fire. Flame bloomed in a blossom of reds, oranges, and ferocious golds, engulfing also whites, shattered giants, and mounds of corpses. Stone glowed, snow became steam, night turned noon. For one breathless second, the Night King was lost in the conflagration. Silhouette drowned. Daenerys circled skyward, art hammering, praying to any deity that the myth's end was nigh. The flames dwindled, leaving pools of molten snow that hissed into sour steam. From within, a figure strode forward, blue aura unextinguished. Soot dripped off crystalline armor in smoldering rivulets that cooled to frost midair. The Night King had raised one gauntlet throughout the blaze, creating some unseen shield of deathly cold that split the fire's tide around him. Daenerys' breath caught in horror. Drogon bellowed in frustration. The Night King's gaze lifted to her. From his hand he summoned a javelin of ice, longer than a ballista bolt, barbed and scintillating. With a smooth motion, he drew back and hurled it skyward. Jon watched the missile rise, felt his throat tighten. Drogon pivoted with desperate speed, but the spear carved a frigid blue contrail that struck his left wing at the elbow joint. Scales burst into ice crystals. Membranes split. Drogon reeled, one wing crippled, tumbling into a spiraling descent toward the outer ramparts. Daenerys clung, shouting Dracarys until her voice broke. But Drogon could only manage a stuttering exhalation of flame that spiraled impotently into the night. They vanished behind the western tower, a gout of snow and smoke mocking the crash. A furious roar erupted from Jon's chest. He launched himself at the Night King, Longclaw in both hands, swinging a brutal horizontal cut aimed to sever spine. The Night King parried on the haft of his spear, stepped inside Jon's guard, and slammed an elbow of solid ice into his sternum. Ribs cracked. Jon flew backward, landing hard. Robert answered with a tornado of hammer strikes designed less to hit and more to harry, herd, and stall. He hammered wide, crushing whites that converged to shield their master, each impact a flare of sparks. Still, the intervening corpses proved a wall. The Night King retreated behind 10 swirling, frost-armored lieutenants, pale warriors bearing swords forged of absolute cold. They advanced in an echelon, wielding unnatural speed, intercepting Robert's every angle. Their eyes blazed with the same blue as their lord's, but lacked his depth. Hollowed candles burning only obedience. Robert met them head-on, each swing vaporizing one lieutenant's shoulder or knee. But their swords touched him in turn, leaving streaks of black frost across his pauldrons, biting steel beneath. The heat of the hammer fought off the cold's killing creep, but Robert's breaths already formed blackened plumes. His strength, though titanic, was mortal. Arya and Tormund darted in at Robert's flanks, disrupting the lieutenant's rhythm. Arya's Valyrian dagger sang a dissonant music of quick punctures, darting into gaps at neck joints. One lieutenant fell, ice fracturing along his spine. Tormund's axe severed a different lieutenant at the arms, sending broken shards spinning. Yet for every fallen lieutenant, new ranks of dead surged forward, skeletal archers loosing obsidian dark arrows, ghoulish children biting ankles with jagged teeth. The heroes found themselves forced gradually toward the charred maw, where the trench fire had collapsed. Within the castle halls, Sansa seized any soldier not yet engaged, directing them to the breach Robert's earlier impacts had opened. She ordered the remaining stores of pitch, resin, and duskwood oil to be ready. Master Walken, trembling, helped coordinate, eyes bulging at each tremor that rattled soot from the ceiling. Infantry armed with buckets of volatile fire lined above the breach. At Sansa's cue, they tipped the contents through murder holes. A luminous cascade of seething, liquid flame rained atop the whites pressing Robert's line. Corpses burst into violent conflagrations, lighting the winter yard with a hellish bloom. Robert hurled himself clear, a split second before the downpour, rolling shoulder first. He rose black-scorched and coughing, but alive. The onslaught gave Jon time to regain footing, gulp air, and rejoin Robert. Together they skidded across melting slush toward the Night King, who, shielded by his spear's aura, stalked through flames unburned. He reached the center of the courtyard where the great heart tree from Winterfell's Godswood had once been replanted in a soil-filled stone planter centuries prior for its healing sap, now only a charred, leafless stump under netted tarps. The Night King placed a hand upon the stump and whispered an inaudible word. Frost coursed through the dead wood, crystals blossoming like obscene flowers. The stump cracked, split open, and from within a blade emerged, clear as glass, impossibly thin, radiating lethal hunger. He drew it, and the stump withered into dust around it. A sword burst from old Night itself. Melisandre's knees buckled when she witnessed this. She clutched the stone parapet, ruby flaring a desperate red. Sweat beaded upon her brow despite the chill. She scoured her memory of flames for meaning. The Night King had reclaimed some buried relic, a weapon older than the wall. She realized the nature of its forging. The blade contained the weirwood's last memory, an echo of children's magic twisted into a weapon of endless winter. If that blade pierced Robert or John, the fire within their blood would freeze forever. Bran, through raven eyes, saw the weapon and recalled an ancient whisper of ice named Soul Thief, fashioned by the other's first magi from roots of a heart tree, slain under moon shadow aeons ago. It could drink the soul heat of any mortal with a single slice. Its return meant the Night King sought more than victory. He sought to unwrite life from the living's greatest fires. Back on the field, Jon squared his shoulders, forcing breath through bruised lungs. Robert spat blood and swung his hammer onto his shoulder. They exchanged one glance, understanding without words. Jon would distract. Robert would aim the crushing blow. Jon darted forward, fighting low then high, long claw whistling intricate arcs. The Night King's new sword met the Valyrian steel with a shriek like glaciers, screaming across mountain tops. Sparks of white and onyx erupted. Each impact numbed Jon's arms, the blade leaching warmth through the weapon into his bones. He adjusted grip, forcing speed and footwork to compensate for draining strength. Robert surged on Jon's flank, hammer a blur of glowing crescents. He smashed once, parried deftly by the Night King's sword, then rotated into a backswing aimed for the spear. The Night King sidestepped, letting that second strike crash through a rank of wights. He executed a half-turn, stabbing for Robert's neck. Jon, ignoring pain, interposed Longclaw, knocking the attack wide. In the same instant, Arya launched herself off a fallen ballista beam, bounding onto the Night King's shoulder like a cat. She drove her Valyrian dagger toward the gap beneath the ice crown. For the first time, a hint of urgency flickered in the Night King's expression. He vanished in a gust of frost, body dissolving into shards that reassembled 2 paces away, Arya thrusting at empty air. She landed lightly, momentum carrying her spin into a reverse grip. The Night King retaliated with a palm of glacial force that threw her across the yard. She bounced once, skidding, but rolled to her feet, chest heaving. Ghost lunged at the Night King's calf, jaws clamping. The ancient being looked downward, almost amused, and booted the direwolf aside with impossible strength. Ghost yelped, but regained footing, hackles bristling. Meanwhile, Bran saw the tapestry fray, too many disaster threads spinning from the night. He opened his vision deeper, reaching beyond Winterfell to the fiery heart of the world. In the patterns of molten stone coursing beneath Earth's crust, he found the ember of creation, the first men called Skyforge. He tugged at the memory of Harkoon, the hero forging dawn for battle in the long night. Bran whispered to the ravens a single injunction: call the storm. Across leagues of air, ravens screamed, wheeling. Winds shifted. Clouds fractured to reveal a faint shimmer of aurora at the celestial north. Charged particles whistled into Winterfell's atmosphere, stirring magnetisms dormant for centuries. Snowflakes became prisms, reflecting emerald light. Subtle warmth threaded the air, no sun's gift, but the planet itself exhaling. At Melisandre's, Ruby the pulse brightened in response. She straightened, hair whipping. She extended her delicate, scar-scarred hands over the courtyard and began to chant in High Valyrian, summoning the alchemical marriage of fire and life. Her voice carried like a choir, harmonic waves layering over the din. Every torch flared higher, every ember waxed. Robert felt raw flame crawl up his hammer's haft, licking his gloves without burning. Jon saw Longclaw's fuller glow a deeper violet, hunger of steel for one final forging. They met each other's eyes. In that brief look lived all ice and fire's prophecy, not as prophecy predicted but as need demanded. Jon disengaged, sprinted opposite direction to create a cross pattern. The Night King tracked him, spear angle. Robert accelerated. He raised the hammer high overhead with both hands. Melisandre's chant hit crescendo. The hammer answered, runes igniting so bright they seared after images into all who witnessed. The Night King whirled and launched the spear at Robert, aiming center mass. But Arya's dagger flashed. She intercepted the spear mid-flight, twisting it aside just enough for the shaft to graze Robert's vambrace instead of piercing chest. Ice exploded across his arm, but the dragonglass runes melted it quickly. Jon sights the opening. He hurled Longclaw like a javelin. The sword spun end over end, shining, closing the distance with improbable precision. The Night King cocked his stolen sword to deflect, but Jon's throw was ruse. He charged right on its heels. The Night King parried Longclaw aside, leaving himself minimally open as Jon closed. Robert reached strike distance. He swung downward in a blow, meant to hammer mountains flat. The Night King raised his soul-stealing blade, crossing over like Ciserguard. Steel and ice met with cataclysmic detonation. Hammer's dragonglass fractured, exploding outward in a sphere of incandescent shards. Runes burst in flare of pure white. Robert roared as the weapon's head disintegrated under the strain, his hands whipped backward by recoil. But the explosion also sheared through the Night King's sword, snapping the magical blade at midpoint, sending the top half cartwheeling across the yard in glittering spiral. Jon slammed bodily into the Night King at that precise heartbeat, dagger of dragonglass clutched in gauntleted fist. He plunged it into the fracture Robert's earlier blow had opened in the Night King's cuirass. The shards sank deep, hissing like snow on forge iron. Silence swallowed the yard, as though air itself waited. Blue radiance glared out through the fissure, intensifying until it blanched the night. Jon yanked the dagger free and rolled away. The Night King stood still. Cracks spidered through his torso, branching along limbs, up the neck to the regal crown of ice. Blue light leaked, pulsed erratically, then steadied into incandescent fury. He exploded. A ring of force blasted outward, hurling Jon, Robert, Arya, Ghost, and every nearby combatant to the ground. Fragments of ice howled into stone, embedding like shrapnel. A column of azure fire gushed skyward, punching a void through the clouds. Snow turned to steam. In that instant, every white on the battlefield froze mid-motion. Their blue-lit eyes flickered, guttered, extinguished. Bodies crumpled like marionettes cut from strings. Silence rippled outward from Winterfell's walls as the dead collapsed by the thousands across moor and lane. Jon lay on his back, gasping. Snowflakes drifted across his vision, melting on warm tears he did not realize he shed. He sat up, chest throbbing, ribs aflame. Around him, the courtyard was carpeted with corpses now truly lifeless. No rise, no rattling groan, only stillness. Robert knelt inside the rough crater where the Night King had stood a moment earlier. The haft of his hammer remained in his grip, headless, haft charred. He looked across the void where fragments of the Night King's crown lay glittering. Slowly he rose, chest heaving. He raised the broken haft overhead and bellowed a primal triumph that echoed across Winterfell, across the north, across memory itself. Cheers erupted, growing from ragged to thunderous. Tormund's laughter mingled with Davos's ragged, sobbing prayer. Arya caught her breath, eyes brimful. Gendry dropped to a knee, staring at Robert as though at a sunrise. Melisandre swayed at the parapet, face glazed with awe and exhaustion, ruby dimming back to ember. But in Bran's vision, a seam had not yet closed. He saw the broken sword fragment, now lying near a fissure where the courtyard stones had split. He watched as an unseen essence, like curling smoke of starless night, leaked from the shards, seeping into the crevice, worming downward into the black beneath Winterfell. Bran tried to follow, but the current was slippery, intangible. It flowed toward roots older than the keep, toward weirwood memories buried deep. The Night King's essence had not surrendered. It retreated like a wounded serpent, coiling around a final plan. Bran's heart stilled. He could not speak aloud, locked in warped trance, but the ravens screamed overhead, wheeling, telling their disquiet. Only a few heard. Melisandre looked up, brow furrowing. Sam staggered from the stairwell, clutching his tome, understanding little but sensing dread. Jon approached Robert, clapped him on the shoulder. "We did it," he whispered, though uncertainty laced his tone. Robert turned, beard blackened with soot, eyes alight. "We did," he agreed, then coughed, leaning heavily on the smoking haft. "By gods, boy, we broke the bloody winter." The yard erupted in new cheers as news spread. The dead army collapsed. Beyond the walls, watchers reported whole legions falling inert. The Night King's power was sundered. Winter's darkest heart had cracked, yet Daenerys had not returned. Jon's joy guttered. He scanned westward, where smoke rose from Drogon's crash site. He took 2 steps, then sprinted past wounded, past celebrating men toward the inner gate. Ghost bounded with him. On the ramparts, Arya followed, intent as shadow. Robert watched them go, expression shifting from triumph to solemn understanding. He signaled Gendry and Davos. "See to the wounded," he rasped. "I will join the boy. Battle's done, but not our duty." He started after Jon, but his legs shook, ritual fire slowly draining, leaving mortal wounds clearer. The sword's frost, whereby the Night King had countered, lingered inside Robert's flesh. Purple bruises mottled his side. Yet he gritted teeth and forced steps onward. Each breath a blast forged smoke, hammer haft clutched like a pilgrim's staff. At the western courtyard, the snow was churned into mud and broken stone. Black smoke issued from Drogon's collapsed wing. Jon skidded around jagged masonry, heart battering ribs harder than any spear's blow. He found Daenerys beneath Drogon's extended forearm, sheltered by the dragon's protective curl. Her cloak smoldered, but her body miraculously unbroken. Drogon's great amber eye fluttered open at Jon's approach, low, keen warbling from deep chest cavities. Daenerys lifted her head, face smudged with ash, hair unbound. Tears cut clear tracks. When she saw Jon, relief flooded her features, chased quickly by grief. "He cannot fly," she whispered, voice hoarse. "The spear, it shattered the wing bones." Jon pressed a hand to Drogon's hot scales. The beast trembled, pain rippling. "We'll heal him," Jon promised, though he did not know how. "We'll find maesters, dragon lords, anyone." Daenerys shook her head, eyes downcast. "We might mend bone, but not trust. He fears the sky now." She touched the charred membrane. It crumbled beneath her fingers. Robert arrived, leaning on the ruined hammer haft. He surveyed the scene, expression softening. "Fought bravely," he said, voice surprisingly gentle to the dragon. Drogon rumbled, acknowledging. Robert turned to Daenerys. "Your fire broke the line. Without it, we'd be corpses." She scoffed bitterly. "Fire did nothing. He survived the flames." "It was all of us," Jon interjected. He looked to Arya, who crouched examining the spear fragments embedded in wing joints. She carefully loosened them, glancing at Daenerys for permission. At a nod, Arya eased the shards free. Drogon winced but held still. The night storm began to wane. Gray clouds parted, revealing spangled stars. Aurora ribbons still wove faint green over the horizon, remnant of Bran's summons. Snowflakes drifted, gentled now, no longer driven by malice. In the east dawn's first blush tinged clouds with rose. But hearts could not lift yet. As the sun's promise neared, Bran's ravens shrieked with renewed fervor. They circled above the shattered courtyard, spiraling downward, clustering around the crevice where the Night King had burst. Their black forms circled like omen. Melisandre reached the crater, gaze following ravens. She peered into the fissure, felt cold radiating despite the vanquished whites. A cold not of winter, but of void. She threw a torch inside. Flames whooshed out, extinguished instantly. Her ruby flared, exposing her gauntlets of bruises along ancient skin. She murmured to the shadows, "He seeks the roots." Sam joined her, flipping desperately through pages torn from scrolls about heart trees and spells of binding. "If he infests the roots," he gasped, "he could corrupt the magic that binds the wall stones together. The same veins run beneath Winterfell. If he poisons them, he could bloom again." Melisandre nodded grim. "We must descend." Davos, overhearing, cursed under breath. "More tunnels? 7 spare us." But he followed. Bran at last stirred from his trance, eyes rolled back to their green. He whispered, faint, "Caves beneath crypts. He's found the black pool." The one with no reflection. Jon heard Bran's message from a guard and hurried to meet Melisandre at the crater. Robert and Daenerys remained with Drogon, tending wounds. Arya chosen to accompany Jon once more. Sam and Davos descended first, led by flickering torches that guttered at each draft of unnatural chill. Melisandre followed, chanting low. Her words steadied the flame on her staff. They traversed an ancient stair, carved when Winterfell was young. Roots wormed through cracks. Icicles spiked from ceiling yet did not drip. Time here seemed paused. Far below, the rustle of ravens' wings echoed like applause in empty hall. They emerged at a cavernous chamber beneath the Godswood's foundation, walls alive with heartroot sinews, glowing faintly crimson as though veins pumped sap still. In the center yawned a pool of ink so black it reflected nothing. No torchlight, no faces. Bran's black pool. A figure knelt at its edge. Not the Night King. He was destroyed, but a shifting haze of midnight, coalescing into his silhouette. The fragments of crown hovered above the pool, assembled by unseen magics, and within them the ghost of his visage glimmered. The essence swirled, seeking vessel. Melisandre stepped into the glow of her staff. "You have no domain here," she intoned. "You are broken." The shadow craned its fractured helm slowly. It projected no eyes, yet the weight of its emptiness pressed upon their hearts. Frost spread across water's surface, forming delicate webs that reached toward the shore. Jon raised Longclaw found earlier, retrieved from courtyard. Dragon glass dagger in offhand. Arya flanked, silent as dusk. Sam read from scroll. "When the roots bleed frost, life's flame must feed them. That's the rite of cleansing." He held aloft a vial of thick red fluid. "Stag's blood, saved from Melisandre's earlier ritual." Melisandre nodded. "We must sacrifice heat greater than his cold." Davos scoffed. "We have little fire left." Robert's voice echoed from stair. He limped into chamber, torso wrapped in temporary linen, arm pale where frost had bitten. In his good hand, he held the broken hammer haft, still warm. "He can have what warmth I've left," Robert growled. "The gods returned me. If it keeps winter dead, they can damn well take me back." Jon's throat constricted. "No." Robert shrugged. "It was borrowed time, lad. Melisandre assessed, troubled. A king's blood once more. It may be enough, but I fear the pool will pull more than life. It will drink his will, his memory, leave naught but husk. He would die a second time, this one absolute. Lenidue, Polda. Ah, Robert chuckled grimly. Spent years drinking myself toward oblivion anyhow. He looked at John. Tell Ned when you see him, I did right at the end. John advanced, placing a hand on Robert's chest. There must be another way. The fire in you came from our Lord. Let that God take the dead another way. Sam flipped pages. It doesn't have to be a death, just a fire of living essence. Strong emotion can fuel it. Love, fury, sacrifice. The Red Priests call it burning the heart without breaking the flesh. He glanced up. If someone can channel their life flame without surrendering body, it might suffice. Arya's eyes cut to John's, then to Daenerys' absence above. You know who has that fire. John swallowed. Daenerys, her lineage, dragon's blood, fire made flesh. But she was needed to rule, to rebuild. Yet Drogon's maimed wing bound her from the sky. Perhaps her destiny lay deeper. Robert rested his hand on John's shoulder. Go fetch your queen. I'll stand guard against the shade. He twirled hammer haft, stance wide. John sprinted back up the stair, lungs ragged but resolve clear. He found Daenerys beside Drogon, scale surgeons prepping poultices. He drew her aside, recounted the dire scene. Her amethyst eyes steel. If my fire can end him forever, I will give it gladly. She stroked Drogon's snout. Wait for me, my son. They descended together. In the abyss, the Night King's spirit had grown. Black webs more intricate, crown shards fusing with root skeletons. Robert stood before it, battered but unmoved, hammer haft burning like ember spear. Sam sprinkled stag's blood along pool rim. The droplets hissed, turning steam to crimson mist that curled around shadow figure. Melisandre extended her hand to Daenerys across the gap. You must speak the old tongue's flame call. Repeat after me. She whispered arcane syllables. Daenerys echoed them, voice resonant. Partly the roar of dragons. The ruby's glow built to furnace intensity. Roots along cavern walls ignited in gentle fire without consuming wood. Their warmth pressed back the void. The shadow reeled, crowns, shards, quivering. It lunged in slow swirl toward Melisandre, but Robert intercepted. Hammer haft, striking the spirit's forefront. Impact sent ripples of heat searing through shade. It recoiled, edges fraying. Daenerys stepped to pool's edge. She extended palms. Flames licked up her forearms, though they did not burn. Her eyes reflected golden fire, swirling. She inhaled deeply, summoning the heart fire of House Targaryen. 13 generations of dragon riders singing in her blood. She exhaled a single word older than Valyria, Dracarys. A jet of living flame burst from her hands, arching into the pool. The black surface boiled, roiling, turning crimson with light. The Night King's shadow howled in voiceless fury, pulled downward. Its crown shattered again, shards tumbling into molten reflection. Robert and Arya hurled the hammer haft and daggers of dragon glass into the vortex, each impact flaring brighter. The cavern shook. Stalactites rained dust. Cyclone of fire and frost turned skyward through crevice, visible to all above as a pillar of opposing forces. The ravens took wing, spiraling outward, heralding the final struggle. Daenerys' knees buckled. Jon braced her from behind, arms wrapped around waist, feeding his own heat into her. He whispered their memory of dragonstones as wines, of sand between toes, of promise made beneath dark skies. The memories fueled the blaze. The pool's surface dissolved into pure light. There was a moment of suspension, then a deafening implosion as the void collapsed into a singular ember, no larger than a firefly. It floated upward, hovered at eye level, pulsating weakly. Melisandre cupped it between her palms. The ruby's facets refracted its pallid glow. "The last spark of him," she murmured. Robert raised a brow. "Crush it." Melisandre sniffed, something like a weary laugh. "There is a more fitting end." She turned to the roots, pressed the ember into one knot where sap pulsed. The ember sank in, dissolving. The roots glowed gold a brief moment, then returned to natural hue. She exhaled. "Let the earth remember him as hunger quenched." Silence resumed. No chill remained. The air was warm as spring. Robert sagged, catching himself on knee. John helped him upright. Daenerys leaned into John, drained but alive. Arya retrieved her dagger, wiping it on sleeve, eyes roaming for danger but finding none. Sam closed his book with trembling relief. Davos chuckled dryly. "7 take me, but I'm fond of living." They ascended. Sunlight met them at tunnel mouth. First true dawn in a long night. Winterfell's towers glowed amber. Survivors wept, embraced, worked to clear bodies. Dead no longer rose. The sky wore threads of rose and teal. Dragons wheeled and crows perched quietly, as though momentarily sated. Robert surveyed the ruin, the people, the horizon. Breath misted lightly in warmer air. He turned to Jon and Daenerys, clasped both by shoulders. "We have work, my children of fire and frost. A realm to mend, beasts to heal, songs to write." Daenerys smiled faintly. "And a king to name." Jon glanced between them. Robert laughed. "Titles later, ale first." He strode toward the great hall. Every step left prints that steamed as sun struck them, thawing ground that had known only ice. Behind him, Jon and Daenerys followed, hands entwined, and Arya's shadow slipped between rays, silent guardian. High above, Bran watched through raven eyes, the dawn blooming across the north. And for the first time, he could recall, no whisper of impending night followed the light. The wheel had turned, the long winter broken. How the world would reshape itself he could not yet see, but the song of ice and fire had found a new verse, one forged by hammers and hearts, not prophecy alone. Within the great hall, Robert raised a cask, bellowing for cups. Steam rose from shards of icicles as hearth fires roared. The living gathered, wounded and whole, each stepping into warmth. Their laughter was raw, their tears salted by memory of fallen, but together they formed a chorus louder than the wind. Outside, the last snowflake of the endless storm settled on the courtyard's flagstone, melted, and did not return. Morning sunlight poured into Winterfell, as if it had never truly tasted the castle's stones before, gold threading through broken shutters, illuminating every scar from the night that had attempted to swallow the world. The great hall resembled the aftermath of a long feast. Only the debris was not overturned trenchers and spilled ale, but shattered shields, discarded gauntlets, and dark stains of blood already turning brown. In the central hearth, a new fire crackled, fed not by pine logs alone, but by a quiet determination that took root in every heart still beating within the walls. Men moved with the stunned reverence of pilgrims who had glimpsed the interior of a miracle and did not yet know if it would last beyond the dawn. Robert Baratheon sat at the high table where once he had laughed with Eddard Stark over distant memories of battles won and lost. His shoulders sagged now, the crushed remains of the hammer haft laid across his knees like a relic awaiting interment. The rush of power granted by ritual and victory had drained from him overnight. What remained felt almost mortal, though the new vigor in his blood still surprised him whenever he shifted in his seat and found no twinge of gout, no ache of overindulgent joints. He studied his hands, both scarred and fresh, mapping new constellations of bruises left by the Night King's final assault. Every heartbeat was a drum in his ears, reminding him he was alive because fire and prophecy had demanded it, and because a desperate world had needed a symbol. Now the world needed a ruler, or perhaps it needed many rulers, men and women, willing to share a burden that had broken spines for 300 years. Jon Snow leaned against the table's edge, eyes half-lidded from exhaustion. He nursed a mug of weak ale that tasted more of ashes than barley, but warmth mattered more than flavor. Daenerys sat beside him on a plain wooden bench rather than a seat of honor, her hands wrapped around a stone cup of broth the cooks insisted would keep the chill from settling in her bones. Sweat still beaded along her hairline when she thought of Drogon's mangled wing, yet each time the dragon rumbled in distant courtyard sheds, she felt a throb of fierce gratitude. The sound reminded her that at least one child of Valyria still drew breath. Sansa stood at the head of the hall, reading off tallies to a cluster of stewards. Flour stores were adequate for a fortnight at half rations. Smoked pork, perhaps 10 days more. The cellars still held barrels of onion, carrot, and parsnip that survived the freeze, but casks of wine had been cracked and leached away to soothe wounded throats. Refugees still arrived, dazed by the sudden quiet after weeks of living under moonlit nightmares, and they came with more mouths than food. She sent runners to every holdfast between White Harbor and Deepwood Motte, requesting grain, promising repayment in whatever coin the future kingdom could mint. She had learned as much from Littlefinger's manipulations as from her mother's kindness. The heart might inspire courage, but ledgers kept armies from devouring themselves. As she dictated, Tyrion Lannister limped through shattered doorposts behind her, quill tucked behind ear, parchment scrolls fanned like feathers beneath his arm. He bowed mock low, wincing at the slice across his ribs no healer had yet stitched. "Lady Stark," he said, voice softer than usual now that his wit, along with his blood, had been thinned. "You demanded a record of every able-bodied fighter still breathing. I have it." He laid the scroll on a workable smoothing curls that threatened to spring back. 3,000 healthy enough to march. 2,000 more who can guard walls by this evening if you give them poultices and strong drink. Maester Walken believes 600 will never rise again. Another 800 hover on the brink. Sansa's marbled composure cracked, but only a line of grief creased her brow. "We honor the dead when the living are safe," she answered. "Your numbers will help." Across the hall, Gendry and Arya whispered above a crudely sketched map of the King's Road. Arya had no taste for politics, but her wolf-sharp senses knew the realm's tremors before they became quakes. She traced a finger from Winterfell to King's Landing, then angled toward Storm's End. Gendry watched, brow furrowed. His bruised arms looked like fruit left too long in frost, but still he itched to hammer iron and bone into something new. "If the capital is as weak as rumor says," Arya told him, voice low, "Cersei will be sharpening claws. Euron Greyjoy's fleet remains unscathed. The south is quiet because lions prefer to nap before they pounce." Gendry hesitated. Storm's End could rally the Stormlands, but who leads them? The Lord is dead. His line shattered. His expression shifted as he said it, as though the words tasted strange on his tongue. Arya nudged his shoulder. "Robert's line exists," she countered. "If a bastard can claim the North support for House Baratheon, the lords will listen." She did not add that those same lords might balk at a resurrected legend commanding more than sword. Robert's presence was gift and curse both. At the far end of the hall, Bran's wheelchair perched near a window slit. Sunlight streaked over his still face as ravens fluttered restless outside. His gaze, blank to ordinary sight, wandered far across newly thawed field. He felt cracks in the tapestry of fate knitting closed, but others widened. Through the network of heart trees, he tasted sorrow pooling in distant holdfasts, where white corpses lay unburied and families feared plague. He saw flickers of red sails on Blackwater Bay, Euron Greyjoy's masts sporting some sinister new sigil stitched by Cersei's order. In King's Landing, wildfire caches slept like coiled vipers under streets where starving beggars now scoured for rats. Bran's lungs tightened. Night's greatest darkness had been extinguished, yet men's hungers remained, and men could summon nightmares colder than winter if greed ignited them. Davos Seaworth entered with a briskness that belied the limp from a sword graze. He nodded to Robert, scanned the faces gathered, and cleared his throat. "We need a council meeting," he announced, voice echoing. "Not tomorrow. Not after more funeral pyres. Now. The realm will wake to word that the dead fell here. Every raven in the sky already carries some tale. If we do not choose our tale quickly, others will craft their own." He looked pointedly at Tyrion, then at Daenerys. "And rumors rise faster than dead men, lady." Robert grunted. "A council," he echoed, rolling the hammer haft from knee to knee. "Gods, I remember those hours of droning, 10 seconds of sense." He levered himself upright, bones popping, and glared around with the mock severity of a schoolmaster. "Then, let us assemble." Within half an hour, long trestle tables had been dragged into a loose rectangle, with broken chairs substituted by ale barrels or overturned crates. Melisandre, wan and swaying, arrived only once she tied fresh linen over burning feet. Every step still felt as if coals clung to her soles, yet she claimed it penance she would endure. Samwell Tarly came balancing, 3 books thicker than his calf, cheeks flushed from exertion. An ill-matched company took seats: Sansa, Tyrion, Jon, Daenerys, Robert, Davos, Bran, Arya, Gendry, Melisandre, Sam, and Brienne of Tarth, who remained at the door until Robert insisted she sit, for any realm forged anew would require giants to guard its children, and Brienne's honor was a tower. Once settled, Jon spoke first. "We have won a battle, perhaps the war. Yet winter still blankets half the north." He reached to rub fractured ribs, grimacing. "Our people need food and roofs and hope." Sansa followed. "The lords of the Reach possess grain. If even half survive Cersei's requisitions, we must negotiate shipments north." Tyrion tapped quill against desk. "Negotiation implies trust. We have little coin now and fewer ships. The Ironborn hold the narrow sea, blocking trade routes." He fixed Robert with a measuring look. "Unless a Storm Lord can raise a fleet from Shipbreaker Bay to answer them." Robert lifted eyebrow toward Gendry. Gendry shifted uneasily. "If I sail under a crowned stag, most captains may follow. But shipwrights need coin. Storm's End's treasury is cobweb." "Niben so nistoriste." Davos coughed. "But the stepstones, preying on Essosi merchants. If we offered safe passage, tariffs might raise funds." He shrugged. "I've run smuggling lanes my whole life. I know which pockets jingle loudest." Daenerys listened, weighing each thread of authority. The halls of King's Landing and Meereen alike still rang in her mind with echoes of council sessions turned to backbiting. Here, somehow, there was little envy. No Iron Throne overshadowed them, its spines pricking flesh and ego. Yet justice required a seat. She met Jon's gaze. He understood before she voiced it. "Power must rest somewhere," he murmured. Melisandre's eyes burned with residual flame. The fire showed a council of many, not a single ruler. Like the swords of the Targaryen, conquered welded into the throne. The lords must stand together or be reforged by flame. Robert drained an ale horn, slammed it down. "Then let's hold a council of the realm. A great assembly on neutral ground. Not King's Landing, too steeped in treachery. Harrenhal, perhaps? Its ghosts know every perfidy, but serve none. Tyrion rubbed beard, considering. Harrenhal lies between north and south, yet Cersei would never set foot in a ruin she cannot defend. Jon shook head. Cersei will not parley. She will see our weakness in victory and strike. Brienne cleared her throat. She knows dragons live. A crippled dragon still breathes fire. That may give her pause. Daenerys felt Drogon's pain through the link dragons and riders share. The wing would mend slowly, but flame remained. We must show her we seek peace, not conquest. Robert laughed darkly. Peace? If you think Cersei Lannister will kneel to peace, you never smelled her father's faults. She only kneels to keep a knife hidden. None. Banta. Arya spoke for first time, voice soft but flint hot. Peace with Cersei cost my father his head. Silence thickened until Bran lifted his two old eyes. Time flows, yet stones remember. He spoke halting, as though words were boat heavy with water. Cersei's tower stands on powder, wildfire and pride. If we do nothing, she will burn the city rather than surrender. We must grant her reason not to. Reason. Arya scoffed. Family, Bran whispered. She loves her children beyond reason. She has none left in flesh. His gaze tracked Arya's face, then Jon's. But she has the ghost of inheritance. Sansa realized what he implied. Tommen and Myrcella are dead. But there remains Gendry, Bran said. Arya half rose in protest. Jon's fingers twitched near swordless belt. Robert frowned like a thundercloud. Gendry looked around, baffled. Bran continued. Gendry's Baratheon bloodlines trace not only Robert, but also Cersei's children by claim. If he stands before her wearing the crown stag, offering mercy for surrender, none she won. Tyrion considered. An intriguing gambit. Present the realm with a surviving Baratheon heir legitimate by arms, if not by bed. Force Cersei to either acknowledge him and parley, or condemn herself in eyes of Stormlands. Robert grunted. I spent years denying bastards. Now one may save the realm. Irony tastes like vinegar. He turned to Gendry. Boy, do you have backbone for such stagecraft. Gendry's face flushed. I swung hammers at ice giants. I can stand in front of a lioness. Yet his eyes flickered to Arya, seeking anchor. She nodded once, and his shoulders squared. Davos slapped table. Then we march south. Sansa raised a hand. We cannot abandon Winterfell. Spring warmth will bring rot if bodies remain. Food lines must stabilize. Travel through the neck may bog armies in melt mud. Jon spoke. We send an embassy, not an army. He looked to Robert, then Daenerys. Robert, Gendry, Davos, Tyrion, myself. Perhaps Brienne as neutral sword. A small retinue fast enough to ride, large enough to impress. Daenerys inhaled. Her heart bucked at letting Jon leave again. Yet a queen could not clutch. I will remain to heal Drogon and guard the north. Robert stood, joints cracking. And I'll ride with the boy. Tyrell roses may help Stormlander seeds grow. He smirked. Besides, been too long since I felt southern air that stinks less of sweat and more of betrayal. Tyrion raised up. To betrayal, he toasted dryly. Sam opened book. Before any leave, we must record what happened here. Maesters in Old Town will dispute undead tales. Unless the story stands unified, we risk centuries of denial. Jon nodded. Right. Seal copies to every Citadel hall. No. Bran's voice drifted. What is written can be burned. Better carve truth in hearts. Feed travelers. Let bards carry songs. Sansa softly. Bards require coin. Robert bellowed laughter. I'll pay them in stories of my glory. they'll gorge. Yet mirth faded quickly. He felt the exhaustion of resuscitated sinew. Wounds from the Night King's sword still lurked beneath skin. Each heartbeat scraped edges of hidden ice. He hid wince behind tankard. Melisandre's eyes caught the gesture. When council dispersed, she followed Robert into corridor where torches burned low. "The frost remains," she said without preamble. Robert leaned against column. "I feel it." She drew small pouch, pressing it to his wrist. Dragonstone obsidian ground to powder with myrrh and clove. "Brew in wine nightly. It draws cold from blood. If you neglect this, winter may yet claim you." Robert studied the pouch, lips curling wry. "Which tea?" "Fire's medicine," she corrected. "I have little left. Use it well." In the courtyard, blacksmiths resumed forging. Tabo Mat supervised as apprentices smelted shattered dragon glass in clay crucibles. The metal, fused with steel, created veins of shimmering crimson along new swords and arrowheads. Gendry joined them, though Arya pulled him aside long enough to thrust a small bundle into his hands. Inside lay a dark green cloak stitched from Nymeria's shed fur. The direwolf had returned to gift Arya tufts before vanishing again into the wolf's wood. "For warmth," she muttered. Gendry touched her cheek. "For courage." He tucked a crafted ring onto her glove, twin hammers flanking a running wolf. "For oaths." Night funeral pyres turned the sky to ember and soot. Sansa read names of fallen, while Davos poured flagons of summer wine over tongues of flame. Jon recited a short prayer of Night's Watch. "Our watch has ended." Daenerys murmured Valyrian blessings, each syllable forming silver thread against the dark. Bran watched silently, eyes reflecting flames. Robert Allen Fist sung an old Stormlander lament. "Over the hills my brothers sleep, thunder hammers deep." His baritone cracked, but no one minded. The north wind carried most verses away. By dawn, the embassy prepared. Jon hugged Sansa at the gate, his face open with trust. She would hold Winterfell. She slipped him a parchment rolled tight, lists of grain obligations, notes on lordly dispositions. "You are half Stark," she whispered, "but remember your other half is unknown to them. Meet suspicion with patience." He promised. Gendry clasped Arya's forearm. Neither spoke. When she released him, her fingertips lingered a heartbeat longer than courtesy. And that silent promise rooted deeper than any vow. Brienne knelt before Sansa for blessing to ride. Sansa rested hands on the knight's pauldrons. "Protect them. Return." Brienne touched her sword hilt. "By oath and honor." The company, 25 riders all told, filed out the eastern gate as sun-glazed towers in copper. Jon rode a dun gelding, cloaked in wolf-gray trimmed white. Robert astride a black stallion nearly as broad as a small cart. His makeshift hammer strapped to saddle. A new antler circlet hammered from old armor plates ringed his temples. Tyrion balanced atop a short chestnut, muttering about saddle sores. Davos took second rank, eyes scanning horizon. Gendry rode near Robert, adjusting to strange weight of Baratheon plate, refashioned overnight, golden sigil on field of black, though edges bore the fresh scuffs of infants. Brienne, in sapphire armor, brought up rear with a half-dozen unsullied volunteers, lent by Daenerys for credibility. The King's Road south was mostly snowmelt and churned mud. Trees dripped crystals that shattered on saddles. At each village tongues stilled, then cheers rose once elders recognized cloaked forms. Tales of the night, King's Fall preceded them. Children waved, presenting woven crowns of ivy. Old men bowed despite arthritic spines. Robert accepted tokens with embarrassment he disguised as boisterous humor. Tyrion counted the number of times innkeepers offered free ale. By the 7th tavern, He conceded there were worse burdens than traveling with a living legend. At Moat Cailin, they found crannogmen greeting them. Howland Reed himself emerged from towers half reclaimed by rushes, gray strands matted to skull. He clasped John in damp hug, whispered of debts owed to Ned Stark. When introduced to Robert, Reed's eyes widened. Memories of rebellion flickered across weathered face. "We fight new wars with old ghosts," he murmured. Robert clapped his shoulder. "The ghosts fought well last night." Reed guided them past causeways where still water mirrored sky like polished armor. He provided boats to speed journey across the swamplands, his people poling through channels clogged with reeds. Tyrion cursed leeches, but Gendry marveled at pinpricks of sunlight flickering on water's skin. While they traveled, news galloped ahead. Ravens from Winterfell reached White Harbor, Bear Island, even lonely Skagos Peaks. At Old Town, archmaesters argued by candlelight, scoffing at scrolls describing ice dragons and walking corpses. Yet, one by one admitted charred bones shipped by Davos weeks earlier matched humans dead decades. Debate cracked open the gray curia. Students whispered of a new long night averted. Some scribes prepared to head north and verify miracles before cynics could dismiss them. In King's Landing, however, Qyburn read stolen raven messages with scholarly fascination. He presented them to Queen Cersei, who stood at balcony overlooking Blackwater Bay, the cold wind flattening lion-red silks to her body. She scanned the parchment, lips curling. "A resurrected Robert," she said, voice soft as silk drawn over blade. Her fingers twitched at memory of his fists, his drunken snore. "Alive to steal my crown." Euron, lounging against pillar, barked loud. "Dead men cannot sire heirs. What's a ghost to the Iron Fleet?" She ignored him, eyeing the italic scrawl. Mention of bastard Gendry claiming Baratheon standard. A knot tightened behind her ribs. The echo of Tommen's last scream unfurling from memory's abyss. She clenched parchment like throat of some insolent retainer. "Send ravens to every bannerman," she commanded Qyburn. "We convene garrison in the city. I want scorpions mounted on every wall. If Robert marches, we greet him with steel." Qyburn bowed. "And the wildfire?" She paused. "Have it ready." Yet even in capital cracks widen. People of Flea Bottom heard whispers through rat tunnels. The Night's Queen fell by North's courage, while South remained idle behind golden lions. Bread lines lengthened, rot-gut prices soared. Faith militant, once crushed, found new converts among hungry, who believed gods favored North's humble heroes. One Septon Tarmond preached beneath Ragman's hill that a council of many should lead next age, not a single tyrant queen. His words spread like fire in Old City wood. During the embassy's fourth night, camped on King's Road verge near abandoned holdfast, Robert woke to chill seeping from her. He sat alone by dying ember, rubbed thighs raw. He tried the witch tea earlier. After initial bitterness, a warmth had crawled through his chest, but frost still gnawed wrists. He looked at stars and wondered whether revival had been gift or cruel jest. He had chance to right mistakes, could he? Wine fog that once numbed regret no longer tempted him. Each swallow tasted too sharp now. He thought of Cersei's face when she first wore crown, feral joy that disguised terror. He had not loved her even in youth, but he pitied the mother who lost children to War of Thrones. He muttered apology to ghosts, Lyanna, Ned, Renly, even Stannis. The world kept spinning, crushing legacies into dust. Perhaps only deeds of mercy endure. He resolved that if parley failed, he might still save innocence by becoming shield rather than hammer. At dawn, scouts reported Greywater watch banners along Causeway's south exit. Reed men escorting wagons piled with dried eel and marsh grains bound north. John smiled. Winterfell would not starve. They pressed on. Winter weeks melted to half-frozen puddles. boots squelching. By the time they crossed Trident Ford, where once Rhaegar fell, Robert halted, brow furrowed. Current ran murky beneath fragile ice. He dismounted, knelt, let gloved fingers brush water. "A river remembers blood," he murmured. Gendry joined him quietly. "Does victory taste different now?" Robert stared toward rolling hills where ghosts might duel eternally. "I thought slaying a prince would make songs enough. Songs fade faster than scars." He patted Gendry's shoulder. "Make better songs." Approaching King's Landing, columns of smoke marred sky. Refuse fires of swelling refugees pressed against city walls. The company turned off-road to encamp within Blackwater Rush's reed bed, hidden by willows. Tyrion and Davos rowed small skiff through secret sewer entrance Tyrion once designed. They emerged in gloom underneath Red Keep's belly. Gold cloaks patrolled above, ill-paid and ill-fed. Slipping past them proved child's play for two veterans of darker nights. In shabby tavern near Mudgate, they met Bronn, now commander of City Watch by self-appointment. Coin convinced him to reveal Scorpion Tower placements, fleet numbers, mood of garrison. It was bleak. Sel's words demanded pay months overdue, Tyrell granaries never replaced, and Euron's ships drank casks of arbor gold, while common folk gnawed salt pork rinds. Confidence in Lion Queen balanced upon steel of Euron's madness, and Wildfire Qyburn whispered about. Tyrion returned to Willow Camp, face pallid. "We hold a single lever," he said. "The city yearns for bread and peace. We bring both, or it burns." Robert rubbed a beard. "We'll offer bread." Jon met Brienne's gaze. "And peace will depend on whose voice Cersei trusts." They looked at Gendry. That night ravens bore formal requests sealed with combined wax. Crowned stag, direwolf, three-headed dragon, lion of Lannister, in gold leaf, for Tyrion's signature. Latter offered parley at ruins of the Dragon Pit, at sunrise 2 days hence. Neutral ground inside city, yet open, ringed by cracked walls, impossible to hide ambush without Dragon's Eye. Cersei accepted, though Qyburn advised otherwise. "I wish to see dead men walking," she sneered. "If Robert lives, I'll stab him myself." At dawn the Dragon Pit loomed, its rib-caged roof collapsed centuries before. Wildflowers clawed through broken mortar, weak winter blossoms trembling in wind. Company entered first, escorted by 6 unsullied spears. Robert wore battered antler crown, Jon a wolf pelt, Gendry plain armor bright with new sigil. Tyrion carried parchment rolled tight, terms drafted along muddy campfire. Brienne watched walls for hidden crossbows. Moments later, Cersei arrived atop black horse, armored in gold, chased crimson, helm crowned with lion mane crest. Euron strutted beside, leather coat clanking with iron rings, eyes glittering mischief. Qyburn shadowed her, carrying green glass vial that pulsed faintly. Sir Gregor Clegane lumbered, massive even in silence. Eyes met, no words for long breath. Robert stepped forward alone, unarmed by show, though dagger concealed behind belt. Voice echoed deep. "Queen Cersei, I thought Bor took my life. Seems fate reserved privilege for you, but you missed." She snorted. "Fate is spiteful. It brings you back only to kneel." He shook head. "I do not want throne. I want realm whole." He gestured to Gendry. "This is Gendry Waters, my blood. I name him legitimate Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End. He seeks peace." Gendry swallowed, then spoke steady. "If the crown recognizes my claim, Stormlands will stand with capital. But we demand bread for North and mercy for small folk." Cersei's eyes flicked to Gendry, so like Robert in jawline, but softness of youth. Something flickered, then hardened. "A king's bastards have no place in lineage," she spat. "I will not cede crown to flea-bottom mongrel." She drew breath, gaze skewering Tyrion. Nor bargain with traitors. Tyrion sighed. Sister, you know your city starves. She laughed brittle. Better starve than bow. She signaled Qyburn. He stepped forward, uncorked phial. Pale vapor coiled upward. Wildfire mist, highly volatile, he intoned. A single spark will wreath this ruin in green flame. His eyes met Tyrion's. The hand recalls its appetite. Robert's pulse thudded. He sensed archers on walls, scorpions aim. A trembling hush swallowed Pitt. Jon moved beside Robert. Cersei, the dead marched. They will march again if men remain divided. We must rebuild wall, cleanse lands, help us. Her gaze slid to Jon's. Targaryen bastard with Stark's brooding eyes. She smirked. Tell me, how is little Dragon Queen? Crippled now, I hear. Jon stepped once. Brienne caught his elbow. Tension coiled. Suddenly a roar ripped sky. Drogon swooped overhead. Shadow blotting sun. His wounded wing beat heavy, but sure enough. Flames streaked as he exhaled in display over bay before banking to perch on hill outside Pit. Stone trembled. Euron's confidence flickered. Men on wall froze. Cersei's jaw clenched. From behind broken arches, Daenerys emerged, clad in quilted gray riding coat, silver hair unbound. She had flown overnight, ignoring healers, determination lending strength. She joined Jon, Robert, Gendry, 4 symbols, side by side. She spoke quietly. No queen should rule over ash and bone. I've seen cities burn. Memory of Meereen, of Astapor's collapse, of children's bones, left by Meereen's masters, haunted her voice. I swear Dragonfire will not scorch King's Landing, so long as its queen spares it first. Cersei's eyes narrowed. Words, words. She stepped toward Qyburn, slender hand poised. I hold a flame of my own. Robert advanced, raised palm. You harm them, you lose everything. Look around. Your lions hunger. Your sellswords wait only for coin. Euron's fleet sails for plunder, not loyalty. He nodded toward gate where Bronn stood, flanked by disheveled gold cloaks. They carried no banners. The city watch will not die for a queen who starves them. Bronn shrugged at Cersei, expression apologetic in mercenary way. Euron snarled, hand falling to cutlass. Tyrion addressed him. Leave while coin still jingles, Kraken. Take your iron rabble west. We debate kingdoms, not barns. Euron glanced at Queen, found no certainty, spat and stalked away, cussing. Robert extended hand again, voice low but carrying. Cersei dot. The realm's children will sing of this day. Do they sing of a mother who turned from vengeance, or one who made pyres of innocence? He swallowed regret. Our marriage was misery, but I know you loved our children. Love them still by sparing others' sons. Silence fell, except wind whistling through ribs of ruin. Cersei stared at Qyburn's phial, its vapor swirling. Her lips parted. For the first time since Sept of Baelor burned, her eyes shimmered. Stillness lasted, heartbeats stretched like iron on rack. Then her hand trembled. She closed fingers around the flask, slowly, stopping it. She breathed, shoulders shuddering. I will parley, she said. Tension released like snapped bowstrings. Robert exhaled a ragged breath he did not know he held. Daenerys' knees weakened. Jon steadied her. Gendry felt sweat trickle down back, though air remained cool. Details followed. Grain convoys, joint tribunals for war crimes, safe exile for any who swore fealty to new council. They agreed to assemble lords at Harrenhal within moons, turned to draft charter. Cersei demanded seat on council. Robert allowed, under oath to abide by majority. She balked. Tyrion added clause that any breach would void protections. She accepted begrudgingly. When parchments were signed, Qyburn sealed Wildfire back into lead-stopped chest. Dragon Pit Gate opened, letting company exit under uneasy truce. Drogon watched from hill, growled but did not flame. Cersei rode back to Red Keep with Qyburn, Sir Gregor lumbering behind. She did not look back. That night, camp spread outside walls. Robert slumped near fire, fatigue sagging jaw. Melisandre tended his frost-scarred wrist, chanting. Jon and Daenerys walked along riverbank, murmuring about charter. Equal voices for North, Stormlands, Reach, Vale, Dorne, Crownlands, Iron Islands if they swore to peace. They envisioned rebuilding the shattered Night's Watch into envoy corps guarding all frontiers, not just northern snow. In King's Landing, small folk lit candles in cracked windows. Rumor flew that Dragon Queen had promised bread. Bakeries reopened, grain stores unlocked under gold cloaks newly sworn to neutrality. Blossom of cautious hope sprouted. Days passed while documents were copied. Gendry sat with Brienne on rampart overlooking sea. He confessed fear of lords who would scorn a blacksmith lord. She related tales of men mocked her for being tall. She overcame by standing taller. He smiled. Arya rode south in secret after ravens reported company's safe arrival. She slipped through postern gate disguised as lantern girl, found Gendry atop wall. Their reunion wordless, embrace in lamplight, storm lantern swinging overhead. She would serve as scout and blade for council's future, refusing seat but offering steel in dark. Back north, Winterfell blossomed under Sansa's rule. Refugees rebuilt barns, fields thawed, seeds planted early under Bran's guidance, who communed with slow crocus bulbs. Sam established new infirmary merging maestercraft with free folk herb lore. Ghost prowled ramparts at dusk, yet tail wagged when children dared pat his flank. Spring unfurled across realm like tent canvas pulled free of icy poles. At Harrenhal lords gathered. The great ruin echoed with hammering carpenters erecting cloth hall. Lords of Arryn, Royce, Tarley, Martells, envoy Lady Silva, Jon Greyjoy representing nephew absent, all arrived. They met under vaulted sky where ravens perched on melted stone towers. The Great Council lasted 18 days. Brienne presided impartial. Tyrion kept minutes. Robert rarely spoke. When he did, benches creaked beneath weight of his candor. He proposed abolishing royal primogeniture, instead electing High Council every decade where regions each had voices based on harvest levies and troop contributions. Daenerys argued for establishing guild charters to ensure small folk representation. Jon pressed for codified rights of free folk to roam but pay trade levy. Sansa demanded independent northern rule but pledged defense levy. Discussions roared by torchlight, arguments cooled in dawn breezes. Melisandre, standing at courtyard hearth each night, prayed flames to show threads. She guided choices away from war. On 19th dawn a charter was signed, union of 7 courts. Each region retained autonomy, but high matters, war, coinage, roads, decided by Council of Stags, honoring Robert's rebirth symbol. King or queen became high steward, elected for 12 winters, bound by council votes. First high steward chosen unanimously, Sansa Stark. She blanched, but accepted, promising to hold office until charter's mechanisms matured, then stand aside for next election. Robert became Warden of Gales, charged to forge fleets guarding realm, content. Sea wind suited a hammer tempered by grief. Daenerys titled Keeper of Dragons and traded envoy to Essos. She would rebuild Valyrian roads and protect Free City's commerce. Jon turned Lord Protector of the Wall, commanding new Free Watch, mixed ranks of Northmen, free folk, Dothraki wanderers, even former Unsullied seeking quiet. Cersei swore fealty to charter. Council placed her as guardian of coin for Crownlands, a role fenced by auditors. She wore a fixed smile, bitter but resolved. Anger dulled by purpose. Rebuild city for children lost. Wyvern maintained post as alchemist, but under supervision of Sam and archmaesters tasked with safe research. Euron vanished across sea. Rumor said he sailed for far sunset lands, perhaps to place crown on Skull Island. Few cared. Harrenhal's ravens carried news worldwide. At Sunspear, children sang of Queen in the north. In Bravos tithe, collectors groaned, predicting trade shifts. In Karth, spice merchants toasted Dragon Queen turned diplomat. The age of single Iron Throne ended. A mosaic dawned. Months later, spring sun warmed Winterfell's stones. Gardens bloomed where pyres had burned. Bran wheeled through courtyard, where small folk planted saplings of heart trees grown from seeds blessed by children of forest, discovered beyond shattered wildling camps. Their leaves rustled crimson in mild breeze. Robert visited beard-streaked new gray. He knelt under fresh heart sapling, touched bark. Frost scars on wrist faded. Tea had done work. He smiled at Bran. Hammer found peace, he said. Bran's gaze distant but bright. You repaid debts, Bran answered. Jon and Daenerys arrived on horseback. Drogon circled above, wings strong, though scarred. Rhaegal flew with him. From old Valyria they had fetched wild eggs with hopes to expand flight. As dragons roared, children squealed delight rather than fear. Gendry and Arya walked hand in hand from smithy. She wore plain leathers, but a new ring. He carried a prototype plowshare forged of dragonsteel alloy. Promising fields tilled faster. Sansa oversaw masons raising new library wing. Tyrion directed wagon trains loaded with texts from Old Town duplicates. Sam set up scriptorium to train healers. Davos taught orphans to sail model boats on moat, telling tales of Onion Knight who once smuggled hope. Brienne sparred with young women who sought path of sword, her blue armor gleaming. Melisandre, hair streaked silver, stood on battlements at twilight, ruby dormant. Flames told her little now. Age crept, but she smiled. A human smile, content to watch sun rather than prophecy. As dusk pooled lavender over fields, bells rang. People gathered in yard where platforms stood. Sansa addressed crowd. Tonight we light lanterns not for morning, but for new paths. Hundreds of glass lanterns ignited, rising on hot air, drifting skyward like stars ascending. Robert lifted tankard. To winter's ended. Voices roared. Jon kissed Daenerys beneath lantern glow. Ghost howled approval. Arya nudged Gendry, whispered adventure to come. He laughed. Tyrion sipped wine, satisfied. High above, lanterns merged with constellations. The sky held no omen, only infinite stories waiting ink. The song of hammer and night had resolved into chord of dawn. Children would learn that darkness can be broken when hearts choose fire, not fear. And though snow would fall again someday, they now carried embers to outshine it. The realm breathed, healed by slow pulse of spring. And somewhere beyond, in whisper of wind over still waters, a broken crown of ice lay forgotten, currents carrying shards to distant, depthless sea. No eyes of blue watched, only reflection of stars.